In this juncture, we will now be proceeding with the policy forum for our concept on sustainable food systems. And we have quite an impressive lineup of panelists with us today. And I, for one, I'm looking forward to a fascinating discussion. So for now, we actually have one more person who is supposed to join us as panelists today. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, he's not available to join us at this time. So we're sending our regards to you, Mr. Chris Stevens. And now, to mark the start of our policy forum, allow me to introduce to you our panelists. So, our first panelist is Dr. Nippon Poapongsakorn. He is a distinguished fellow from Thailand Development Research Institute, or TDRI, an author to over 200 research projects and publications related to agricultural policies with focus on water management and climate change, rural credit markets, labor economics and human resources, trade, competition and industrial policies, and anti-corruption and conflicts of interest policy. He has also held leadership positions and is associated with numerous national and international institutions that work on agricultural development. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Nippon. Now, our following panelist is Dr. Mercedita A. Sombilia. She is the Undersecretary of the Regional Development Group at the National Economic Development Authority of the Philippines. Her work as a researcher focuses primarily on policy studies related to the development of agricultural and rural economies, to which has allowed her a rich perspective on the challenges within the agricultural sector, particularly in the ASEAN region. She has also served as consultant to various development partners, such as the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, and many more, including other governmental ministries, and continues to do research that is aligned with different national and international policy institutions. Thank you for being here with us, Dr. Mercedita. So our next panelist is Dr. Eiichi Kusano. He is a senior researcher in the Social Science Division at Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, or JIRCAS. He is an expert in food supply and demand analysis using macro-level data as well as on food value chains, to which he is associated with the ASEAN Food Security Information System, or AFSIS, here in Bangkok, and of the ASEAN Sectoral Working Group on Agriculture Cooperatives. His current research is focused on the impact of the fall armyworm, which is infecting countries in the Mekong region, as well as global food and nutrition supply estimation for international research centers. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Eiichi. And lastly, we have Dr. Ravi Katarpal. He is the Executive Secretary of Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institutions since 2017. Previously, he served as head in plant quarantine at the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, National Bureau of Plants Genetic Resources in New Delhi, and as regional director of ICAR, Center for Agriculture and Bioscience International for South Asia. His work focuses in facilitating information management and promoting networking and capacity building with partners in the Asia-Pacific region, with projects on agricultural innovation systems, phytosanitary compliance, pesticide risk mitigation, agri-biotechnology and bioresources, agricultural science technology indicators, and risk mitigation. He is also currently the chair of the Tropical Agricultural Platform of the United Nations and Agricultural Organization, and as well of the Global Forum of Agricultural Research and Innovation. And for today's forum, to sit with us as panel moderator, we have Dr. Suresh Babu. He is the Senior Research Fellow and Head of Capacity Strengthening at the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI. He has over 30 years of expertise in conducting policy research, capacity development, and policy advisory activities in the sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, Central Asia, and other developing regions. At IFPRI, he guides regional and country programs in their capacity developing activities in support of national food security and agricultural policies for countries in Africa. Throughout his career, he has published 20 books and over 100 peer-reviewed journal papers on food and agricultural policies in developing countries and has served on editorial boards of several leading academic journals. Let's give it for Dr. Ravi and Dr. Suresh. And as special mention, I'd like to mention as well our rapporteurs for this session who are also with us today on site. Dr. Duncan Boughton from the Michigan State University and Dr. Orashot Napasintuwong from Kasetsart University. With that, let's now turn our attention to Dr. Suresh Babu as he moderates this entire panel discussion. Dr. Suresh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ara. First of all, let me extend a warm welcome to all those in this hall and distinguished participants, you have taken time to come, and I recognize a lot of familiar faces as well as key leaders in our field, and thanks for taking your time to come, and welcome to all who are online. And it has been in the last 2 days, more than 500 participants registered for this conference, and each session has huge number of participants participating. So I want to extend a warm welcome to online participants. Feel free to ask questions as we speak, as we discuss, as we dialogue with you. So it's going to be a kind of an open forum, open dialogue, but guided kind of a forum. To start with, from my own perspective, having worked in this field of agricultural development for a long time, if you look back 20-25 years ago, we were talking about agricultural development. How do we use agricultural productivity to drive the economic development process at that time? So we basically worked on agricultural development, added few other sectors called integrated role development, if you remember, and we kind of kept moving towards what in the last 15 years or so we called about agricultural transformation. How do we transform the sector into a modern sector, into a sector that connects to the rest of the world through commercialization, for example, right? Then we kind of kept going with that thought process and say, oh, wow, we have solved the basic hunger problem in many countries, but then nutrition problem remains a challenge for us. So we have to go back to agriculture and see how agriculture actually can contribute to nutritional well-being. We talked about that for some time, obesity issues, and we discussed that, and then it occurred to us as that it's not just nutrition, we need to go beyond nutrition to health. Remember that? Agriculture, health, nutrition linkages. Some of the papers address that in our conference. But more recently, we are hearing about food system transformation. And where is that coming from? What is that thought process? And we had last year food system, UN Food System Summit, where we all gathered together in New York to talk about various challenges that the food system as a whole faces, and how can we translate the food system thinking process in our strategies and policies at the national level. And that is what is being talked about, that's what being as framework that we collectively have taken on to address the issues. Because food system perspective gives not just the productivity or markets or trade, it brings all together. From the land to the final consumer and the health of the consumer. And COVID particularly has given us a wake-up call that you can't just stop with eating and being healthy, because that health is also related to animal health and livestock production, and so food system brings it all together. At the same time, we are also talking about climate change. How do we increase the resilience of the production systems that we are engaged in? And how do we work towards mitigation and adaptation policies? And that helps us to talk about not just in the productivity or markets or trade perspective, but a system perspective to bring it all together. In fact, it's not new, but at the farm level, we talked about system perspective 30 years ago. If you remember, we were doing research on farming system research. For those who are young people here, we did consider system perspective at the farm level in those days, but we were not thinking at the national or a macro level. That's what we are doing right now, bringing all the sectors together in order to address the problems that we are facing, from the land, inputs, natural resources, to all the way to health of the community, health of with all of us, including animals and human beings. So that's what we are trying to do. To set that stage for this dialogue, I have kind of asked Dr. Nippon to give us about 10 minutes overview presentation using Thailand as an example, as a case study. And the preliminary questions that we shared with the distinguished panelists will be used by Dr. Nippon to set the stage for Thailand, and that gives us, both the audience here as well as online, to see the broad framework, and then we'll pick up from there broader discussions with our panelists. Dr. Nippon, you have been already introduced, so please, you don't need introduction to this audience in Thailand, but with your distinguished career, we request you to give us the Thailand picture for 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, and then we take it from there. Shall we do that?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Babu. I would like to thank the organizer, particularly Aura and Orashot and IFPRI, for giving me an honor to speak in this very important conference and have a chance to meet old friends from the Philippines, from US, from Japan, etc. Okay, I'm not going to discuss the topic that I'm going to discuss. I'm following the instruction of Babu. Okay, but before we discuss the problem in our agricultural and food system problem, let me point out that Thailand's success has in agricultural and food system transformation. It's a history of 160 years, dated back when we first opened our country to trade in 1850. So we have been going through 6 stages of transformation. We are now reaching the stage of industrialization. I'll post this PowerPoint on the website so you can have details information. Okay, as a result, the modern food sector, the share of modern food sector is now roughly about 60 to 65%. And the value chain has been shifting from traditional system towards transitional, not yet fully modern system, but transitional system. Okay. What are our success? The food system has successfully transformed from traditional supply chain towards the modern or transitional modern supply chain, thanks to the emergence of the foreign supermarket in 1990s. Foreign supermarket first penetrated Asia, and Thailand is the first country in that period that was penetrated by foreign supermarket. Okay, the impact of the transformation, we achieved food security, poverty and malnourishment reduction, large reduction. Being one of the world's major exporters of several agricultural and food products. And our modern retail market now account for more than 60% of the market. And these are the information, particularly the structural change account for 42% of the economic change, dating, if you look at the data and comparing with Malaysia. Okay, and as a result, the share of agricultural employment and agricultural GDP decline. And at the bottom, you can see sharp decline in poverty reduction. Okay, and these are some of the proxies of the agricultural transformation, in Thailand. Now, what are the major problems facing Thai agricultural and food system? For agricultural system, the agricultural transformation stalled in early 2000, because of the slowdown in investment, particularly foreign direct investment. Okay. Then in terms of resource and production, we have greenhouse gas Agriculture still produce a large amount of greenhouse gas, and we have the problem of, excessive use of water, particularly for rice production. Okay, excessive use of agricultural chemical, indirect impact of COVID-19 on farm household, income. Not direct income, but indirect income because of the shutdown of the lockdown. And because of the lockdown, and the travel industry, most of the people in agricultural area who send their children to work in the off-farm employment, particularly service sector, get hurt because of the lockdown. Okay. On food system, also malnourishment decline, but malnutrition are on the rise. We have twin problem of stunned children and obese children at the same time, and increasing non-communicable disease, And then good reputation, we have good reputation of export of safe and quality food, but food sold domestically are unsafe, including imported food, surprisingly. And we have high food loss and food waste in Thailand. Okay, these are some of the data. When did we get stalled? The structural change, when did we get stalled? Okay, I don't want to go into details. And comparing the income gap between agriculture and non-agriculture, we are lagging behind China and Malaysia. In Thailand, per capita non-agricultural income is 4.5, 4.6 times per capita GDP, agricultural GDP. Okay. In Malaysia, it's 1.5, 1.6. In China, it's 2.5, 2.6. Thailand is still have a serious problem of inequality, sectoral inequality. And then we are now beginning to lose competitiveness in our export as measured by a comparative advantage index. Okay, greenhouse gas in March is the peak month of hotspot. We burn everything. After, if you want to grow, the next season is coming. Then farmers tend to burn agricultural materials. Okay. And excessive use of water, you can see that the value of marginal product of using water in dry season rice is 0.01 baht per square per cubic meter. In non-agricultural use, it is 155 to 3,400 baht per cubic meter. You can see, the excessive use of water. Okay, food loss of selected product. Vegetable and fruits, very high degree of food loss, 30 to 40%. Okay, food waste, I give you an example. Vegetable supply chain is almost 22%. Okay, what are the biggest problem in food system? That's agricultural system. Now, food system, twin problem of the stunned and obese children, as I already mentioned. This is because of the inappropriate diet due to changes in urban way of life and excessive consumption of sweet, salty and processed food. They consume allowed for salt, they consume allowed 10.8 grams per day, 1.8 times of the amount recommended by WHO. Malaysia is only the country with higher consumption of salt, of sodium than Thailand. High incidence of unsafe food with harmful chemicals, both in the modern as well as traditional markets, domestic as well as imported food. And this is because of the changes in consumption behavior, particularly in urban sector. Okay, now these are the evidence of stunned and obese children and as well as obese adults level of consumption, particularly in street food. Street food has high degree of sodium, you know. And NCDs, incidence of NCD in patients in Thailand, okay, increasing incidence of unsafe food, you know, you can look at this. And these are the data provided by Thaipan. Thaipan is a foundation monitoring food, safe food in the market. And you see the red part is the type of food that contain chemical exceeding, you know, MRL standards. Okay. Innovation. What are the innovation? By innovation, innovation is not just technology. It's a comprehensive version of what the future should look like, which requires changes in many ambits. So that's a general definition of innovation. Now, in agricultural value chain, the new form of rice and cassava value chain, particularly contract. Rice and cassava, you never have contract. Now they begin to have contract. Okay. Now in vegetable, there is the organized vegetable contract between farmer group, supermarket, and startup using the ERP. Now the traceability software has been used by this group. And very recently, a farmer and supermarket partnership for high quality at fair price has been developed. Okay. Agricultural startup mostly providing market platform, but more recently a deep agri-tech startup have emerged to provide farmers with better forecast services and AI services to identify characteristics of rice and paddy, and using ultra spectral to inspect rice nutrition formulas. This is a game changing. There are innovations like excise tax on sugar and sodium, food and nutrition policy, a shift from public approach towards community policy approach. Then using app to promote healthy and personalized food, you see, etc. These are some of the innovation. Food safety, you know, okay. Food loss, we just begin it at the early stage. Now there is research to establish the national baseline for food loss and food waste in Thailand for the first time. Okay. Greenhouse gas, you know, there are also change. The important thing is knowledge gap and role of researcher. The knowledge gap is in Thailand, understanding farmers' behavior, particularly aging farmers and those who are using mobile phone. We call mobile phone farmers because they don't cultivate things by themselves. They hire the service provider to do everything, you know. So very difficult to change their behavior. We are now studying their behavior in collaboration with other research institutes. Knowledge of the future of small farmers is a new thing. Because of the new challenges of pandemic, climate change, and the Ukraine-Russia war. So you have to be able to predict what will happen. 5 years ago, if you ask people, will there be a pandemic killing millions of people around the world? People will say, no way. But now you know that risk is very high. Therefore, we have to look at the future using the strategic foresight framework and then you know, making plans to prepare ahead. This is very important. This is the work that TDRI is now carrying and will provide, you know, the public with some of the information and strategic policy to cope with the future challenge. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Give him a good round of applause for Dr. Nippon. Thank you, Dr. Nippon. You have set the stage for discussions. You brought out a lot of specific issues that we are facing as we talk about food system transformation. And you gave excellent example from Thailand perspective. And you took us back to 60 years and how the industrialization has helped in terms of addressing specific problems, at the same time where you are in terms of stalled structural change that you talked about. and what can we do as we move along. That gives us very good opportunity for actually bringing in my old colleague, and old in the sense we work together in IFPRI, and I'm sorry that Ara did not mention that. Dr. Mercy started as a research fellow at IFPRI, coming from Minnesota with her PhD, and we worked together before she left for Philippines, and we have been very fortunate for her contributions at IFPRI on what you now see as impact model, and that model is used by a lot of countries, policymakers, in order to think about what the future can, how future can be analyzed and how decisions can be made. Of course, Dr. Mercy, I wanted to bring you back to Philippines now, and then in the context of what Dr. Nippon talked about, where are we in Philippines in terms of food system approach to agricultural development, and how you are able to bring various actors and players together, because you are, as Undersecretary, you are in that level to see a broader picture. Give us a quick picture about what is happening in Philippines.
Okay. Thank you, Suresh. Thank you for mentioning about my having a stint with, that is the one thing that I really valued most in my career. It really helped me, do research, and now with government, it's a complete cycle of research results into policy. Let me just give you some the activities that we have been doing because of this COVID-19 pandemic, and which really enabled us to bring together all the actors, to really look at agriculture, the value chain of which, including the consumers, including all the the linkages, the different activities, the different resources, that goes into this food system. We were able to come up with a plan. We call it Proyecto Contra Gutom, which is a project against hunger. And it brought about all different actors, different research organizations, the different agencies of government, including the private sector, to really look at 3 areas of focus: financing, policy, research and development, education, capacity building. And it really wants to elevate the agriculture sector as a sustainable profession, no longer as something that's just really needed. No, it's really a sustainable profession. And there was mention already about how the young people are no longer very much interested in agriculture. So what we are really trying to aim at is to introduce these people agriculture, for them to get into agripreneurs, no longer just primarily on the farm, but really as entrepreneurs, doing agriculture and doing all this, going through this value chain. But there are some challenges, that we still encounter while we do this. I was really looking at Dr. Nippon's, history of Thailand. I think we are also, experiencing the same. But I think Thailand really went very much ahead of us. They're now slumping back. But us, we're still, trying to struggle to that level where Thailand has reached. And I think one of the biggest problem that we have, in pursuing this, is the incomplete agrarian reform. While we did that, for like 2 decades, we're still not complete. And that the land, ownership of land is the way by which farmers could really, move towards more modernized agriculture. They will not invest unless they have the land, and they will not invest, to go through the value chain to the food system that you are talking about. So I think that is the one big problem that we're having now. Not to mention about, of course, the low productivity, which is exacerbated by climate change, now the Russia-Ukraine war, the pandemic that stalled logistics, and, extension work, because of, of people that, were not allowed to go and help, train and disseminate technologies. But all that said, I think we have learned a lot. And COVID-19 really pushed us, accelerated those actions that we need to respond to, which we would not have done if the COVID-19 did not come. Digitalization, improvement of logistics, new technologies to respond to to all these emerging problems. Climate change, Philippines is very vulnerable. So that's also one thing that we are really trying to respond to. And in fact, our Philippine development plan, because we are now in the, we're now going to develop one because of the new administration that we have. The Philippine development plan that we're going to be doing for 2022 to 2028 will revolve around climate change. So smart infrastructure, innovation, regional equity, and climate change are going to be some of the areas of focus in the Philippine development plan. So indeed, the Philippines is really moving to that. But hopefully, we'll be able to get some of the programs. The other thing that we were very thankful for, which really helped some of the MSMEs, the agribusiness sector, continue moving even during the pandemic, were the reforms that we did. We did several tax reforms, the rice trade liberalization, the rice tarification reform. If that was not there, we would have really suffered so much, getting rice from outside. So, it was really good. I mean, I think the administration, the current administration, were able to, put in some reforms to really help us get through, this COVID-19 pandemic, and, continued that food system, working despite all the lockdowns, despite all the, the quarantine activities or situation that we had in the Philippines. Philippines has been one of the countries that have really been very, very, until now, children are not still going to school face to face. So we have been really very stringent in terms of, very strict in terms of trying to contain the, and that really,
Wonderful, wonderful, Dr. Mercy. Thank you. We'll come back to you, and you gave us the overview of the broad brush about the Philippines, and it's very good to know that you have made a lot of progress, and you continue to make progress. At the same time, there are still the challenges that you are facing, and the COVID point you made, that it brought so many positiveness in all this negativeness that we face, is also a point that we need to take into consideration. How the extension system modified itself into digital world to reach the farmers. That mobile farmer that Dr. Nippon talked about is going to be the one of the features of agriculture farming, even in the smallholder sector. We'll come back to that. But in the context of, I want to move to Ichi. Dr. Ichi, in Japan, you have a different perspective. And Japanese saw agriculture, saw modern agriculture with small amount of land a century ago. Okay, so you've been modernized agriculture for more than 100 years now. So that brings us a different perspective to the food systems approach that we are taking. Give us the perspective of Japan. Where are you in this food systems thinking, and how you have been adapting to that?
Thank you. I think there are short-term and long-term issues. In the short term, the big problem would be the disruption of food supply chain. The soaring food prices is a serious issue. The FAO's price index reached a record high since 1990. that is higher than the price hikes in 2008 and 2011. Those price hikes of food and fertilizers are serious problems, especially for importing countries. In the case of Thailand, the rising in prices, fertilizer, maize and wheat prices seems to squeeze feed processing companies.
Just to give a perspective, the smallholders in Japan, smallholder agriculture, how are they coping up with the COVID, 19 situation? How did they get their inputs when you had the lockdown, and what happened in the last 2 years for them?
Okay. In the case of Japan, the food system transformation is owned by a new strategy named Midori strategy, meaning green in Japanese. But the green strategy, Midori strategy, puts weight on the technology development and its social implementation, while that doesn't explicitly address COVID-19. But the government has tackled issues of COVID-19 through such as short-term financial instability of producers through policies with subsidies. So, so short-term shocks like COVID-19 should be addressed, whether that is included in the long-term strategy or not.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll come back to you on the issues related to stalled structural transformation we talked about, and what did I'm sure Japan went through that also. You started transforming yourself, all of a sudden you find yourself, okay, we are slowing down, and how to jumpstart, so to speak. We'll come back to it, and also your expertise in policy modeling, we'll talk about that, right? But let me move to Dr. Ravi Katarpal. Dr. Ravi has been in the system of agricultural research, innovation, a leader in that area, and now he leads a global forum. Dr. Ravi, what is that we should be doing in terms of research and innovation, and how we can support the food system transformation from a broader perspective? And are we ready for taking on the research and innovation activities that can contribute to food system transformation, while we were always in the field looking at the yield increases for the most part? Give us a broader perspective, and then we get into the details.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me in this policy forum. First of all, I don't have a background on policy. I have been a technical man, and I have been working with policymakers and contributing whatever I could. And I learned from my colleagues a bit of policy. Well, the question, Dr. Suresh, is a very, very apt question now, especially when we had the UN Food System Summit, the historical summit, I would say, where for the first time, I believe there is a global focus on agri-food system. And of the many sessions, some of you might have attended, it was not possible to attend all, but of the sessions what I have attended or where we contributed, we could see the focus is now on agricultural innovation system. When you talk of research, there's a lot of research output. How you bring that output to have some socio-economic value, which actually is called innovation in the real sense of the definition of innovation. And here I may like to say, there has been a lot of innovations done even by farmers, but traditional innovations, which are still being done on routine, which are being used, but not documented. We only document scientific innovation. We feel we are the best in the world. No. I think it's the farmer's knowledge which we found is badly missing in terms of having the right kind of inventory, which is missing. That's the very mission of Global Forum of Agriculture, Research and Innovation, not only doesn't stop at research. There, the key focus is on empowering farmer to bring farmer at the center stage of research and development. So we are trying to work with global agencies to involve farmers. Farmer doesn't mean some farmer in the field. It may be someone from a farmers association or leading a farm group or someone who is maybe a big farmer. So involving them in co-designing, co-innovation and co-learning process when we have the national research projects. And this is what we are encouraging globally now through our mode of working, what we call collective actions. And right now, we, in this field, to bring research and innovation to mainstream them into the agri-food system, we are working on family farming, we are working on transformation learning, and we are working on forgotten food. When I say forgotten food, this is something, there are a large number of examples where we had been running for staples and for many crops, which are nutrition and all, high production, but there are a lot of underutilized, neglected crop species, which are highly climate resilient, which are highly nutritious, where the knowledge is now only with the farmers. So we have started a big global campaign to bring that, which may help in many ways. And we have a big program of collective action on that, right from the South Asia up to the Pacific region. We just started it. And we would like to carry it forward in a way that people start respecting the very staple forgotten food, and they become a consumer's requirement. We'll try to see if there are restaurants which can make it popular. There's a lot to be done, you know, like consumer behavior, then farmers' knowledge to be tapped. So this is a way of like really giving importance to the farmers. Coming to the research side, the science side, we are lucky to have done a project with IFPRI on agriculture science technology indicator, where we could see on the research investment which is required. And the focus was, there are a lot of things we got, like Malaysia, Thailand, among the best, Philippines, Indonesia, and some other countries which come next. And there are a lot of data over there, I'm not going to say that, in terms of how much we are investing. But the key point there is, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, the fastest future productivity growth will be activated by prioritizing R&D investment in high-value commodities. High-value commodities are required here, whereas in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand, you need to focus more on the staple crops. So when we do research, it is not just research in a university, there is a professor and some. We really need to have a focus now in research. We can't do research for pleasure. That is something which we all have to keep in mind. There's not much of resources for research. And we have not been so far able to link the basic science research into applied science. And the time has come where we have to do very strategic research in terms of, because we are addressing our agri-food system now. We are not addressing just how to increase the yield, how to increase the nutrition, how to make it pest-free. We are not really addressing that. So the research scenario has to be completely relooked, We can't do traditional kind of research. And in the agri-food system, I would say we need to now bring in agriculture innovation system. Agriculture innovation system guidelines have been developed. I was a party to it with the Tropical Agriculture Platform of FAO, and it has come out 2 years back. We have tried to apply it in 2 countries in Asia, Laos and Thailand, and 7 countries in Africa, and we are trying to analyze the report. How does it work? We have the guidelines, and I can share with anyone who wants. This agriculture innovation system actually talks about creating a multi-stakeholder platform where you can have everyone from the policy to the private sector, to the government, to farmers, to processors, manufacturers, every actor in the value chain from public to private sector. And the whole thing there is how we make the best use of this integrated platform and how we promote it at the national level and how we make it as something which comes as a policy at national level. Because we have policies. Policies people have taken very lightly in Asia. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not from policy background. Anywhere you go, there is a policy, trade, policy, environment, policy, agriculture, policy, seed sector, policy. Every policy man brings its own kingdom, you know, like my policy, this policy. What is it serving when there is no integration among the policies? And if you talk of agri-food system, you can't live with the policies we have, especially in Asian countries, I can say for that. These policies have absolutely not much relevance in what we are aiming for. If you, I mean, some of you must be knowing, Suresh, about the Global Food Policy Report, which is brought out by IFPRI about 2 weeks ago, it was launched. If you happen to see that, you will see where we need to focus. You have an overarching problem of climate change and sustainability, and that is all. Every policy has to fit in there. How you sustain and how you mitigate the climate change. If you read the 11 chapters there, that is how you summarize it. There's a lot of things there, it's a lot of useful information. But that is a report I would like request all the participants here to, if you get a chance, please see it's available on our website, IFPRI website. It's quite easily, freely available on the website. With this, I would like to end here.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi, for a wide range of issues that you brought in, and obviously with your experience, long-standing experience on agricultural and innovation system that you talked about. It's not just about research, but how do you go to farmers and learn from them, co-learning, co-creation, and as well as you touched upon various issues related to now, you ended up with going from basic to applied science, how science has to move from just for the publication's sake. Of course, we have to be academically rigor, that's no question about it, and we all want to publish and be recognized at the level of our peers, you know. So that's when research can actually benefit. But then how do you take that research to the farmers, right? How do you apply that? How do you adapt that? That's another missing dimension you brought out. And of course, we can talk about the climate change, come back, and then how to integrate the policies, multi-sectoral policies in integration. We'll talk about that. So thank you for bringing a wide range of issues, raising the issues. That's the whole purpose of this, the first kind of question that I was asking. Thank you for doing that. Let me turn now, Dr. Nippon, you have taken some rest now, so I'm going to call you to talk about the stalled structural change. I'm so impressed by the term, and it happens. It happens in all the countries. Countries try to pick up, and then all of a sudden you see things are, and we talked about that with you on several occasions. Now give us the perspective from this region and how food systems approach can jumpstart that stalled structural change. And you gave us various aspects of it, but give us the element of what Thailand will do to jumpstart your agricultural, rather food system transformation, and how it is going to help the other regional partners that we are working with. Yeah. Your thoughts on that.
Before I answer your question, I'd like to join Dr. Ravi on on how you disseminate knowledge from and from research to the farmers.
Yes.
In the old days, the first green revolution, when farmers was still very ignorant, then you can easily the extension services from above is very easy. You give them fertilizer, you give them new kind of varieties, and then you give them water. Suddenly, yield increase. But now it's no longer true. Yeah. So the extension, and as you are right, the knowledge is with the professional farmers. The question is, how do you connect these professional farmers with the so-called average farmers? Because average farmers, like in Thailand, they spend most of their time in the city. They earn something like 70% of their household income from non-agricultural sector. So that's very important. Right. And the extension services, the model is obsolete now. The original model, now we are talking about, I like to call it four-pronged extension system, where you don't extend services, government does not have to provide extension services by itself, because now government know least, farmers know best. Right. And if farmers work with academia as well as business people, then that's the key. So exactly. So why don't you let the farmers group, businessmen and university people to work together, and then propose a project to the government, and the government fund the project, decide which project to fund, and evaluate the project. That's the new approach. And this is very good, because in the old days, government always adopt uniform policy, a policy, which is the same across the country. And in agriculture, that diversity is the key. But government officers never understand diversity. And I think this is very important. Now, turning back to Babu's question, briefly speaking, the key point of connecting agricultural transformation to food system transformation is market-driven and the role of the private sector. Because every time you see things change in the food system, it is driven by private sector, mostly. But of course, if at the beginning, it's self-interest by the private sector. Then the issues of governance, has to come in. Government have to look at the governance, but don't intervene too much. I'll give you an example of contract farming. Contract farming first thrives in Thailand, and in those days when contract farming happened in Thailand, the government did not have any laws, any regulations. So it's purely market-driven, but without rules. But gradually, the market work. Those who cheat the contract, both the farmers and the millers and the businessmen, they cannot thrive. They cannot last. Then market begin to work, because it depends on the long-term trust between farmers and businessmen. And then gradually, government just come in and set some rules and regulations, and that's the way you should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nippon. And that is something that we want to continue to talk about. How private sector has played a key role in not only in agriculture transformation, and it has to play a key role in food system transformation as well. And more they are playing the role. And you mentioned extension as an example, because extension is moving from totally public driven at one point towards the input companies promoting their inputs and thereby giving extension services, and mechanization is happening, and they are coming up with their own extension service. And of course, the product buyers, aggregators, because they want quality product from the farmers, and they are providing, from the seed to harvest kind of advice as well. So we need to consider all this pluralistic extension that is happening, and how do we kind of take advantage of that in the context of food system transformation. That's something that can help in this structural transformation that we are talking about, to move further. And Dr. Suryan was talking about yesterday the quantum leap that is needed now, yeah, in terms of moving forward, right? So that will help. So we need to recognize the players, actors and players and the stakeholders who are coming in, and how do we effectively use them. And I'm kind of coming back to Dr. Mercy. Dr. Mercy, you talked about the trade issue, trade reform in Philippines that has really helped Philippines in the context of handling the pandemic and opening up the market, and pretty much saved, the country from having a difficulty with food, basic food security. Talk a little bit more about what exactly happened in Philippines, and how did you manage that? Because some countries are still struggling. Just last week, or 2 days, 3 days ago, while we were all expecting from this Ukraine war, the wheat supply will be reduced, and we were hoping that India could export what it has produced. India came and said, we are putting a ban on wheat export. Politically, it is very important for them, because opposition party can make a big deal about it. We are starving here, you are giving food to the country. That's always the case, right? So we are failing on the one hand in India. You have been succeeding in terms of opening up the market. Give us your perspective on what we can do.
Well, before the pandemic, actually, we were able to pass several reforms that eventually was able to help, especially the business sector, the small, medium, and large enterprises, have access to the revenues from these tax reforms. We have the TRAIN, we have the CREATE law, we have the FEST. All of this were really to, for example, CREATE was able to, reduce the tax. Provide tax incentives to businesses. It lowered their taxes from 30%, I think, to 25%, which was a very, very, very welcome treat to the businesses, especially during the pandemic, wherein, they have been affected. Their operations have been affected. The TRAIN law was able to, raise revenues that eventually flowed back to the MSMEs, the small and medium enterprises, in terms of, providing them with credit, good terms, interest terms credit. The rice tariffication law, it has been a 30-year battle, in terms of really trying to, remove that quantitative restriction and, making it into, and tarifying it. That really saved us, because we were able to import, we removed the minimum access volume for the Philippines, and we tarified all the quantitative restrictions. That brought us, something like, revenues that flowed back to the rice farmers. Yeah. It did not only raise production in rice. In 2019, we slightly declined in rice production, but in 2020, 2021, we saw, because the revenues that were coming from the import were really flowed back in terms of seed production, in terms of mechanization. Rice has been really been neglected in terms of use of machinery, in terms of extension, and in terms of credit availability. So I think that is one good tax reform example that we want to replicate in several commodities. We're now trying to work on livestock, poultry, and dairy competitive development and competitiveness enhancement law. And we are now also trying to do the same thing for sugar. I saw also your sugar, your sugar taxes, that you had in your reforms. So it's the combination of really trying to, help the consumers, but, also trying to get those revenues also to help the farmers. So, the farmers have been coming to us that, no, that with imported rice, coming to us at a very low level, now they are really being supported also in terms of the revenues that we get, which really help them raise their productivity. Rice production in the Philippines was raised from 3.6 metric tons per hectare to 4.47 average now with the implementation of the rice tariffication law. So these are the some of the examples that that probably we should really move into, try to think of reforms that really would help not only both the agriculture and the consumers at large. I would like to also to add something to what Dr. Nippon said with regards to the food systems. I think the key to a successful agri-food systems is really being able to maintain or to continue increasing at a sustainable manner the yield, the productivity of agriculture. Because without that, we will not be able to, in the Philippines, for example, the forward linkage of our agricultural commodities is only 10%. Food and beverages, manufacturing areas. We saw it between 2019 and 2022, it increased from 22%, I think, to 54%. Share in the total gross value added of manufacturing, okay? But those primarily came from imports because our forward linkages of commodities that are needed as inputs to this, food and beverages is really just 10%. Very, very small. So that's, that is one thing that, that I think our Philippine agriculture really needs to move, to accelerate, sustainable increases of agriculture, of productivity. And, diversification. We have been very, very rice-centric until now. All funds have been going to rice. But we need to really develop the other, other high-value crops.
Particularly fruit.
So I think, those are some of the challenges that we're really trying to, to hopefully, impart and recommend to the next administration to look into and hopefully to focus on.
Thank you, Dr. Mercy. You talked about the trade liberalization, opening up the markets and agrarian reforms in general, and that really helps to motivate the farmers to also adopt technology, increase the yield. So setting the right policy environment is fundamental for the productivity gains that can come from research. And Dr. Ravi talked about there is so much research that has been done. And we sometimes say the research is sitting on the shelf, and some researchers would say, hey, that they are sitting on the shelf because that's where it belongs, because it's not applied to the farmer's field. But policy environment, institutional reforms, enabling environment is fundamental. That's the point you are making, and I'm glad you and further policy reforms to maintain that yield growth is also fundamental, so that we don't stay at the same stage. So very useful intervention. And you also mentioned about the diversification. And we will come to that as a particular area, because food system talks about consumers, what they eat and what is the food they are eating, safety food and food loss, and we will come to that area in a minute. But you already alluded to that area. We'll come back to that in the context of nutrition. But I want to turn to Dr. Ichi. Ichi, you are a policy modeler. You take the data, you analyze the data, and you advise the government on what they should be doing. In the context of Japan, how Japanese government is responsive to policy analysis, evidence-based policy making, and how you are advising your policymakers. Give us some stories about success stories. How, for example, we can learn from other countries how you are dealing with the policymakers in terms of getting your results to make evidence-based policies.
In the case of Japan, there is a policy research institute under the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries, names PRIMAF, and PRIMAF directly respond to the request of the government to contribute to the policy making. And PRIMAF has food supply demand model, which is a partial equilibrium model for projecting next 10 years. When we think about the effect of multiple factors in a system, it's not easy to think about the effect of those multiple factors in the system. But model can return logical outputs. So, and food system transformation will require long periods while the factors relating to the food system are changing rapidly. So the models outlooking next 10 years or more would be useful to provide basic information for policymakers.
Okay, wonderful. Now I want to touch upon a question that has come online. By the way, online participants, friends, please send in questions. Our organizers are sending it to me in a tablet here. So I'm reading the questions as you send. Please let the questions come. We have another 20 minutes to go. Please send in the questions. One of the questions that the participants online is asked about, particularly in the context of Thailand, is aging of the farmers. Farmers are becoming aged, and like you already said, that they are becoming mobile farmers because service providers come and cultivate their land for them. That one phenomenon that is happening. On the other hand, farmers are also becoming, not only here in Southeast Asia, in South Asia as well, becoming part-time farmers. Yes, they are not totally depending on agricultural land. Exactly. They have 1 or 2 acres of land to grow something, but they are actually having a full-time job somewhere. So the part-time farmers, the aging farmers, and the mobile farmers, so to speak, are the terms that I'm learning in this conference. But I want to just ask Dr. Ichi, in Japan we know the population is aging as well. How farmers, as they age, how do they maintain their agricultural land, and what do they do, and what lessons we can learn from Japan? Sorry to put you on the spot.
May I add one more question?
Yes, please.
Why the Japanese farmers are very good at quality products? Agricultural products in Japan is of high quality. Why?
Yes, why also?
Very high quality.
Okay, so talk about aging farmers, talk about how you are able to achieve the quality that we are talking about.
Yes, aging is a very big problem in Japan. So Japan has tried to expand its market to abroad. So for that, we need to improve the quality of products. Arable land in Japan is very limited, and we cannot do, labor intensive the mass production. We concentrate to tried to improve the quality of products.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we'll come back to it in the context of how farming systems can be maintained as farmers diversify their profession as well as they get age. I mean, that's a real issue for all the countries. We'll come back to that, particularly as Dr. Mercy said, the youth are not interested in agriculture unless it is business oriented. They want to be running a business, they want to have a mobile phone, and they want to be mobile and connected to urban areas. If you provide that context, and they can still be doing agriculture, but they need to be urbanized, they need to be connected to the technology through mobile, and they need to be highly mobile in their own business sense. That's what we are saying even in Africa, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Dr. Ravi, I want to come back to your fundamental issue that we raised. This policy, nutrition policy, health policy, agriculture policy, within agriculture, land policy, seed policy, we have policy for everything. At least we try to write something down so that we know what we should be doing. And now you talk about integrating them. And I want to give you the context. The context of integration could be climate change. And we go to Glasgow COP26 and say, hey, our country will do this by this year. We will become net zero carbon economy by 2030, 2040, 2050 or whatever. We commit to ourselves. And then we turn back and say, hey, agriculture is emitting so much of greenhouse gases. And that's one area where we can actually bring all the sectors together to work and can help in the process of achieving the goal towards the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, so to speak. I want to put that context and then bring this policy integration you talked about. Give us some perspective from your leadership in India.
Well, it's not my leadership in India, it's just my background.
You have led the institutions in India.
I just work for many institutions
in
the region. What I believe is we need to fix a higher level agenda, or what is the highest level issue for the country. It is now same for everyone, climate change. Then whatever policy A to Z you have, you see in all the policies how you correlate and how you address to that. I think that is a starting point to really integrate the policies. It may not be integration in the real sense. How you are addressing the high level agenda is very crucial. Like you have poverty. The policies in the government to how to eradicate poverty. So there might be many policies which may be helping that. But climate change now is something which has to be at the top. Secondly, one of the SDG, no one talks about. People are happy to talk about zero hunger, poverty, climate change, and finish. They don't talk beyond. There are 17 SDGs. Look at the SDG, it's 11 or 13. Responsible consumption and production.
SCP.
This is for me the most important next to zero hunger. And no one talks about in all international programs. I'm very disappointed actually. I have seen about 40, 50 big workshops and symposiums. What is responsible consumption and production? You will go green, you will not use chemical, you will not do pollution, you will eat properly, you will have proper nutrition. Everything is covered there. Where do you bring nutrition? It's a responsible consumption. And we hardly talk about why I'm saying that. Because fixing a SDG is fine at the UN level. How are they monitoring SDG targets? SDGs have targets. These targets are monitored. When they are monitored, there is someone capturing that. Then they will say after 5 years, this SDG was not achieved. Though we are achieving a lot in nutrition. But with the kind of meetings, workshops, symposium we are having, we are not documenting this SDG at all. And this is missing. I'm telling you with my affiliation with UNESCAP, United Nations Economic Social Commission for Asia Pacific in Bangkok. You won't believe, they told me there are 400,000 consultants in the world capturing information to feed into the how we are complying to the SDG targets and how the UN is going to consolidate and say in 2030 SDG was achieved, partly achieved, 80% achieved or what? They have their benchmark. Like for Asia, UNESCO came out with a report. It was in 2018 November. It was published in Thai newspaper everywhere. They say Asia is not even midway to where it should be. There's a nice graph and they make nice figures. And they give the reason how much we are lagging behind in Asia. And that was the time the DG from FAO came to Bangkok FAO, Director General from, and he said one thing. If you achieve SDGs in Asia, you have achieved in more than half the world. Yep. Look at the demography, we are 60% of the global population. And he was focusing on Asia, and Asia is much behind. Much, much behind. Because targets for Asia has been set very high. Achieved or not, because how you fix a target? For Africa, the target is not very high. And we are going to land up in problem, actually. Apart from all the problems otherwise, we are not talking of responsible consumption and production. Though we are doing it, it's not, my point is it's not being captured. How you will make a policy if you don't have a data? Policy has a scientific rationale. You just can't go and make a policy because 4 people are saying this is good. You need data, you need rational approach, you need evidences. And we are not doing it. Anyway, that is one side of like how we look at the whole scenario of policy integration. Right. Another problem is, with my personal experience, I wanted to work on value chain. We had an agreement with one National Chongqing University at Taiwan, Taichung, Taiwan. And while initially they had experts, I'm a layman. I just start learning from A, B, C every time, new subject. When we were talking of value chain and what we can do in Asia Pacific region in terms of capacity building and all, I tried to learn all the components of the value chain. Then, of course, they were very well versed. They were from the value chain specialists. I asked them one question, which was very important for me. And they had no answer. I said, which country has a policy on value chain? There is no policy globally. Yeah. No country has, and everyone talk value chain, and there's no policy. We all talk with PowerPoints everywhere. Where is the policy on value chain? You have policy on farm production, policy on harvest, on storage, on transport, on marketing, on certification, on the consumption or whatever in the value chain. There's no policy, there's no integrated thinking on the value chain, where you put under one policy, if you have this crop, such a harvest, what should be a kind of a storage, how you should be moving. So this is a big global gap I see, I mean, in my observation. And I was quite disappointed that I had to give up that project with Taichung because I was thinking of moving in a policy way in the region. Then we gave up. I couldn't take a challenge to develop such a policy because I'm not from a policy background. Right.
So you talk about policy integration in various areas, not just in climate change. Also, when it comes to basically developing a value chain, also requires policy integration. So that's a very nice. That gives us to go from the climate change kind of challenge that we are facing to this dietary diversification.
Exactly.
So Dr. Nippon, you talked about specifically challenges of nutrition, obesity increasing, at the same time you also see stunting. And even micronutrient malnutrition has not gone away. So the triple burden of nutrition, and from the Thailand perspective, you have achieved a lot, but then what is the next stage for you? Do we bring in diversified food system, going like Dr. Mercy said, from rice-based to bring in vegetables, but then, and how are we going to do the dietary diversification, increasing the dietary diversity in the plate, and achieve the optimal nutrition we are looking for? some guidance, please.
In this case, the important agency or group of people who are driving the changes in healthy food movement, the so-called healthy food movement, is the National Foundation of Health, and with the group of medical doctors. They have been working, very closely. And thanks, you have to understand that our health system is probably the most decentralized among all government agencies. They have been going towards working with the community level. So there is a big shift in national policy, from national policy to community-based level. And this is very important, because if you work with the community people, then you can understand the people at grassroots level. You understand their problems. You have measurement of children, measurement of babies, everything. You go, and we have a system of primary health care, very strong primary health care in rural area, where the health care, there is a voluntary health care people who work with 10 families, volunteer people who work with families. So these people know the problem of the people very well. And the Ministry of Public Health has been using this as, an intervention point. Then recently, I think around 2000, I don't remember, but around 1990s, there's a big change that the foundation, we have a National Health Foundation, and this National Health Foundation Health Promotion Foundation begin to, fund project on health and using people in the village to help to become a researcher. It's a network of people. Okay. So this is a major shift in Thailand towards a community level. And that's why you can see many things. You can see school with sweet enough canteen. They prohibit selling things like beverage and Coca-Cola drinks in school. No. Right. And then they ask school to have a garden by themselves. They grow vegetables. And now they're trying to do one more thing. They're trying to do the procurement. How can community procure and school procure food by themselves? They are pushing for this. But the thing that they have been very successful is pushing for excise tax on beverage and sugary drinks. They have been successful of pushing for that. Now they are pushing for tax on sodium, but not yet successful. Tax on sodium is much more difficult than sugar. Sugar, because the youngster now, the young generation now, they don't want to drink, sweet, but it's more difficult for sodium. Right. People get used to it. And the food industry also very reluctant to reduce, the use of sodium. Sodium is much more difficult. Right.
Okay. But, yeah. So thank you. You have a question from the audience. Anyone wants to raise the question from the audience? We have another 10 minutes or so. Ora, you want to talk? Is that why you are raising your hand? Some mic, please, to Ora.
I also have a point to make.
So we take few questions from the audience here, and then we'll finish it up.
Thank you so much.
You want to make a point also? Go ahead, Dr. Ora.
Thank you very much for very nice comments and also information that all the panelists have provided. I have one maybe very big question. As you are sitting at Kasetsart University, what should be our role as academic or research institution that can fit in this whole food system transformation towards sustainability or SDG goals that you have mentioned?
Good question.
We have done quite a lot of research. We have done a lot of trainings. We provide a lot of knowledge, but it seems that what we are doing here might not reach, into policy implementation.
Okay. We will take few questions from the audience here, live audience, and please go ahead. Anyone wants to contribute to the discussion or any raising any questions? While you are thinking about it, we'll come to Dr. Ora's question in a minute. Dr. Godo from Japan, he sends us a comment. He was in our one of the sessions yesterday talking about food self-sufficiency in Singapore, if you remember. He is talking about, although industrialization can happen, as in Japan and as in Thailand, in agriculture sector, the transformation of the markets towards high quality products, food safety, it takes a long time. That is his comment. So that I think we should keep that in mind as we go along and in terms of talking about. There is also another comment on monitoring SDGs, and Dr. Ravi talked about it, and it is very keen, and the commentator is supporting that we need to be carefully monitoring what we are doing in terms of SDGs so that we can modify the track that we are moving. Who is going to answer Dr. Ora's question? Ravi, it relates to you, maybe, and make your own point as well.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Kunora, for this very important question. If I am at your place as an academician in a university doing research, guiding students and teaching, what I will do, I'm just saying from my angle, I may not be fully correct. What I will do is, first of all, the students I'm having, I have to make them aware of what is the key global burning issue. Burning issue may be a very big one, and we all contribute a molecule into it. No one solves a complete issue in the world. So I have to explain them, if you do this work, you are contributing for the survival of the planet, or for agri-food system, or for the environment. So I think we really need to relate the work we do in a small lab in a university with the highest global agenda. And we have to instill that confidence and that feeling of being proud to that student that he is doing some noble work. That we need to find a mechanism to honor him, to maybe by some way, the university has to find a mechanism how you have to instill that feeling in the younger generation. He's not just coming and doing an experiment, writing a thesis and going back home. He is contributing for the survival of the planet. That feeling of dignity, pride, I think this has to be instilled in the younger generation. It is not there. In many universities I've observed, some mechanism has to be there, and that will really help in whatever you are doing. If you align it properly with the global agenda or the national agenda of agri-food system.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, on that. I'm going to go back to the audience, live audience here. Dr. Kampanat, you had a question.
Hi, Kampanat from Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. So I would like to ask the panelists that why we focus on high value-added food products, and why we have to also concerned about the low value products, especially in Thailand, because some sort of crop products that has very low product and dealing with the majority of the farmers and the poor. So how can we address these kind of issues? One thing we have to address the high premium product, and we cannot leave all the low value product, such as corn and rice and some crop products.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kampanat. Dr. Kampanat is taking about. There is another question we'll take in the front, please. Madam from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Thank you very much appreciate the speaker's knowledge. I'm from Bureau of the Foreign Agricultural Affairs at the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives. I want to touch up one thing when you, SDG, people talk about SDG, but how many understand SDG?
Exactly.
If you don't understand, you cannot implement it, you cannot work on it. That's one thing. And now at the ministry, we work with the FAO now in 2 indicators. The first one is the SDG indicator 2.4.1, which is the proportion of sustainable area, the proportion of area that do the sustainable agriculture in the 3 components of the sustainability: economic, social, and environment. And another one that we do in the same project is the food loss, is the 12.3.1. We have our agency working on this too. The food loss is quite interesting because food loss and food waste is kind of 2 sides of the production and the consumer, but it contributes to the efficiency, it contributes to climate change, it contributes to livelihood. So for 3.1, we try to figure out our research. Is it compatible with the global methodology? If it is, we can have the national baseline. But come to the 2.4.1, it's just have the approved methodology in 2019. I think it's come as the COVID-19. But when we look in under that, there are 11 indicators. And I think that one thing that I'm here with the academy, I think that the database, in order to put into that methodology and evaluate the indicator, how can we get that data? How we interpret that? Not only the policy, but to the farmer. Or we recognize the smallholders that already done the sustainability. How we rely on the questionnaire that must have the interviewer and very difficult questionnaire. How can citizen can be part of that? That's the process we're doing now. And I think that if the academic STI or RDI can really make it practical, and policy can really facilitate the implementation, I think those what we looking how that we can transform the agri-food systems. But it's a big question, who will do what? And
thank you.
What can I do?
Yes, thank you. From the policy maker perspective, you brought the right issue of how do we monitor, how the academic institutions can help you, and also quality of data, and how do we make decisions using quality data, and that is fundamental for policymakers. And what I'm going to do, we are almost running out of time. We are going to take Dr. Kampanat's question as we talk about staple food. On the one hand, we have to still maintain certain level of staple food production. People are cultivating it, people are using it, but we are also moving towards high value agriculture, value chain, and commercialization of agriculture. How do we balance that? And with that kind of question in mind, I want to give panelists last 1 minute each to give your final thoughts, and then we'll come to a conclusion on this session. Let's start from Ravi this time. Go ahead, Ravi.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would say what Mercy was saying, like sustainability. I pick up that point, and for me, this is the key thing to survive in the era of climate change. And we really need to focus on the various components which contribute to sustainability. And it's not only that we dissect the components, we need to build capacities to do it. And when I say capacity, we have not to build only technical capacity, which normally people do. Diagnostic, detection, this, that. Technical capacity is not going to serve much in the long run. And we in APARI now following all our global projects, blending technical capacity with functional capacities. Because unless you develop soft skills in the people who are highly technical, who can publish high impact factor publication, but with no impact of work on the ground eventually, there's no use. You really need impact on the ground. And you need technical capacities to be blended with functional capacity is number one point. Secondly, capacity building has to be at 3 levels in any domain. Level number 1, individual level, whom we are training, a person. Secondly, it should be in the institutional level. If you build a capacity individual, institution is not supporting him or her, it has no meaning. They have to give infrastructure, project, funding, support, all. And third is the capacity at the enabling environment level, which also include policies. If you build a holistic capacity, looking at the sustainability agenda, I think we have done everything for the planet.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. We move to Dr. Ichi. Yes. Last 1 minute, your thought, please.
Okay. I think the comprehensive vision and strategy is needed to capture food systems. I think the ignition of the food system transformation will be a policy innovation that can change institutions and drive technology innovations, including individual technologies and agricultural practices. And that can give incentives to research for developing technologies and its social implementation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Ichi. Dr. Mercy, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, COVID-19, the Russian-Ukraine war, and we did not mention also the ASF, the African swine fever. These are all game-changing events that we are really, you know, should have learned from, you know, in terms of how we can really modernize the agriculture sector and the food systems.
Very well.
How we can really digitalize things, because many of us are now going online, so we really need to do fast. How we can digitalize agriculture production and still, you know, sustain, attain the sustainable yield increases. How we could provide, you know, the new products, food products that consumers are now demanding. Food, more healthy food, more processed food, more safe food that, you know, that should go to them, you know, in a time manner that would not be affected by lockdowns and all of these things. So I think, you know, we should not lose the learnings that we, you know, that we have, you know, that came to us, you know, during and in this these different events. And I think this does not need the government only, you know, to respond it. It's really a collaborative effort. The private sector, the civil society organizations, the consumers themselves, the academe have to really work together to come up with really a sustainable and effective and efficient food system that would really respond to all these emerging problems that, you know, that will come to forth. So I think, you know, that collaborative, you know, that collaborative work among all the different stakeholders will be very, very essential as we face these different issues.
Thank you, Dr. Mercy. Dr. Nippon, please.
Yeah, in agriculture, particularly agricultural trade, most people tend to believe that farmers are always exploited by businessmen, by traders. And when we begin to work with business people, with you know, farmers, we know that, you know, most of the people are not bad people. They can work together, and if the coordination between these people together will be able to help, you know, bringing, you know, improving the standard of living of the farmers, as well as the production method towards the sustainable system. And I do believe that because I've been working in this area and talking to every people. Last week I organized a workshop on the future of farmers. Believe it or not, more than 300, almost 350 people join us, and they are from various parts, particularly young people. Very important. Young generation give you a new idea, of how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nippon. We are almost done here, and it remains me to just thank the distinguished panelists here, Dr. Nippon, giving us the Thai perspective to start with that helped us to think through a broad range of issues coming from the land issues, the inputs, extension issues, and then productivity issues, and we talked about trade, markets, how do we improve the quality of products, food safety, and how not to waste the production, for example, food loss. We talked about that, and then come to consumption and nutrition, responsible consumption and responsible production. And that itself kind of gives us the broad spectrum of the issues that we talked about. And we talked about inclusiveness in terms of the youth, what are we going to do with youth? And along with that, it also covers the gender. How do we support the vulnerable population? Gender and youth inclusion. We also talked about resilience, climate change issues. And of course, how do we connect policy research results to policy makers, policy engagement, and coming back finally to how academic institutions can help in terms of supporting the young researchers, young students to understand the global issues and how we can teach them to become better global citizens. With that, Dr. Nippon, thank you so much. Dr. Mercy, all the way coming from Philippines, taking your time. You are a busy policy advisor, but you spent some time for us flying in and in a short period of time, and we appreciate. Same thing with Dr. Ichi coming from Japan to be physically present here with us to give Japanese perspective. Of course, Dr. Ravi, with your global perspective, you all enriched the discussion today. And with that, thank you so much for the participants in the audience, face-to-face participants, and participants listening to us online, for sending enormous amount of questions here. We couldn't take few questions, but they are, of course, I thought covered by the discussions that we had. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you once again, and namaste. Thank you.